be in Mark 14, chapter 14, verses 27 to 41, and I've called the Spirit is willing, and I think you'd all agree with that. There are plenty of times when our spirit is very willing to do what we know He wants us to do, but our flesh is super weak. And I think it takes some practice on our part to turn all that over to God and to say, help me to believe this. Help me to understand this. Help me to rely totally on you. That's not a bad prayer. You can ask God to do that. You're being honest. You're saying, I'm having a hard time leaving this all up to you to do. But I want to, because I don't want to carry that burden around with me, whatever it is. In the case of the one we just read, for 50 years, carrying that around, the death of your child. So up until now, following Jesus has been a great experience for the disciples. Up till now, there's not really been a downside. They've witnessed healings and miracles, which were great evidence that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. As you look through the prophets like Isaiah, and you see, and not just Isaiah, but what you see, the kinds of things that the Messiah, the chosen one of God, that's what Messiah means. You knew that the lame were going to walk, and that He was going to heal the sick. He knew there were all kinds of things that the Messiah was going to do. Of course, when somebody comes along and does these things, then it is an evidence. If you were in court, you would present that evidence and say, well, this is what He's been doing. When John the Baptist was in prison, he sent his followers out to Jesus and to say to him, are you the one that we are expecting, or is there another? In other words, are you the Messiah we've been waiting for, or is there somebody else that we should be waiting on? Now, just tell us. And Jesus said, tell John, the lame walk, and the sick are healed. And there's a few other evidences that He gave. In other words, yes, I'm here. You don't need to wait for anybody else. Just because somebody proclaims themselves to be the Son of God doesn't mean they're the Son of God. And the thing that we don't realize, because we don't read it in the Bible, is the fact that there had been false messiahs for a long time. There had been people that had come and started to gather a following. You know, there were those David Koresh type of situations. There were, in fact, there were others. I can't even think of what their names are now. But even in our lifetime, there have been those that tried to lead people astray. Or maybe they were delusional in their own mind. They really thought they were the Christ coming back. I mean, I'll give them that much. The prophets had foretold that when the Messiah came, He would triumph over Israel's enemies. This is some of the prophecies. And Israel once again would be at the top. If you read in 2 Kings, or maybe it's in 1 Kings, when you read about what life was like in Israel when David was king, when he was on top of it, the people sang his praises because he was a man after God's own heart. And that's the kind of ruler you would want to have. That's the kind of ruler we would want to have, right?
Yeah.
So they were told, and they were brought up, and sad to say, the young girls, Jewish girls, were never taught like the boys were. If you watch, what is it, Yentl? If you watch the Barbra Streisand, you'll see she cuts her hair or pulls her hair back and pretends she's a boy so she can buy books from the book peddler so that she can read. And it was just the women were supposed to perform their tasks. And I don't have any problem with that part of it, but I have a problem with the fact that you're keeping the Word of God away from them. What's up with that? That's not so good. So here are these Jewish fishermen who had been taught, at least when they went to the synagogue, they were taught from the prophets what the Messiah was going to be like when he came. And so it's kind of like, when he comes, everything's going to be better. You don't have to worry about the Romans anymore. You won't have to worry about any of the taxes and all this other stuff. They were to be at the top and not at the bottom of society. They were to be the head and not the tail, which was kind of a biblical expression for being in God's favor. But so that's the first part. They had seen the evidence that Jesus was who he says he was. They were excited that they were on the winning team. Who doesn't want to be on the winning team, right? They had witnessed the miracles. They had witnessed the healing. They had witnessed the healing, the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. But now Jesus is telling them something else. He's telling them that they would stand before courts. In other words, you're going to be arrested. You're going to be taken to court for his namesake, for the namesake of Jesus. And that they would be flogged. And they would suffer disgrace. And all of this was going to happen fairly soon. And this must have been very, very difficult for them to understand, because it looked like everything was going so well. It's kind of like we didn't sign up for this part. There was a feeling that was based on their flesh. Don't you remember when the great profession of faith that Peter had made, when Jesus said, "Who do people say that I am?" And some said, some say you're Elijah, come back from the dead. Some people say you're John the Baptist, reincarnated. But he said, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And when he said that, he said, "Flesh and blood is not told, no human person has told you this, but my Father in heaven has revealed this to you." But then as the conversation goes on, Peter starts to rebuke Jesus that you're not going to die. These don't think negative. These things are not going to happen to you. And then, what does he say? Jesus said to him, "Get behind me, Satan, because your mind is not on the things of God. Your mind is on the things of your flesh. You're thinking with your emotions. You're not thinking of the big picture." So, I mean, and I'm not chastising them. I'm just saying it is what it is. We tend to think of the apostles as being these larger-than-life characters that all have halos around their heads and whatever, but they were human beings. And they had a desire, of course, to want to follow Jesus as long as things were going well. But we all know that there was something else that was going to happen. So they had this brief moment of joy as they ate the Passover meal. So you remember? Once a year, Moses had commanded, because God had commanded Moses, "Tell my people that they're to celebrate the Passover." And the Passover was the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which lasted for 7 days. So this is like a really big holiday, and it happens, and a pretty joyous occasion. A time where you would teach your kids and your grandchildren exactly what does the Passover mean. They did not know the role that Judas was about to play. And so during the Passover meal, we know there was a time when on the Mount of Olives, Jesus had said to them, "You will all fall away from me." And Jesus actually quoted the prophet Zechariah when he said, "I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered." I will strike the shepherd, meaning Jesus, and the sheep are going to, and just like sheep, you'd spook them and they'd gone in all 4 directions and gathered together as a herd, but still. 3 times Jesus had predicted his death. And we went through those in Mark. And each one of those times, the disciples, the followers, they didn't have I think it kind of either went over their head or they just didn't want to believe it. They were in denial.
This does not compute.
Yeah, this is not computing. The truth was proclaimed concerning their falling away, but as if to soften the blow of that, Jesus addressed, and he said, "But after I have arisen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." In other words, this seemed to indicate that they were going to see him again. So take heart. Okay, so let's turn to Mark 14, verse 27. "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered," which is what we were just talking about. "But after I have arisen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Now, here's where Peter gets himself into trouble. Peter declares, "Even if all fall away," meaning even if all of these other brothers fall away, I will not. I tell you the truth, Jesus answered, today, yes, tonight, because this is Passover night, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. But even in the face of Jesus saying that to him, Peter says, he insisted emphatically, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And then all the others joined in and said the same thing. Yeah, and what he said, we're going to do that too. And even if we have to die with you, we will. You know that term that words are cheap? Real easy to say the words. He's going to get his chance to show. So verse 32, now they're going, they've had the Passover meal. They've sung their hymn, their song. And now they're going to go to the garden, Gethsemane. And they went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, okay, so at this point he's got the 12 of them, or actually the 11, because Judas has already taken off.